to share with us a topic: what do blind travelers need? So let's all please welcome Toby Willis to the stage.
We're moving slow.
Hi, Toby.
Hi.
Chair for you.
Is there a mic?
Yep, there's a handheld microphone
All
right there.
And I'll just stand near the podium, if that's okay?
Great, yeah.
Where is that?
The standing mic?
No, yeah.
Standing.
I don't need it, it's fine.
Standing mic, right.
All right, yeah, I'm just saying we're moving slow today because my guide dog Dazzler here is 10 years old. She has a disease called degenerative myelopathy, which plagues German Shepherd dogs, unfortunately. It's pretty common. And this is her last trip. This is her retirement trip. So she's going to be just hanging out, being a dog. But I assure you she is well loved and well cared for, despite the little loss of motion and coordination in her back legs. She's in no pain, so it's just some paralysis. But I hope when I'm older and not moving as well as I used to, that someone allows me to work as long as I want to. And right now she is eager to go, despite the limitations that degenerative myelopathy present. So, that said, my name is Toby Willis. I look after inclusive travel for Expedia Group. I've been at Expedia Group for about 8 years, started as a front-end developer working on digital accessibility, worked my way up through product, and now my remit is not just accessibility, but also helping under-traveled and marginalized travelers have a more inclusive experience and better access to travel. But today I wanted to talk to you all about what blind travelers need, because that's my lived experience. I was born with a genetic condition called Leber's congenital amaurosis. For years I thought it was retinitis pigmentosa, very similar symptoms, but I'm losing my vision slowly. So I was born fully sighted. I used to drive a car, probably longer than I should have. That was hard to let go of. But now I have a guide dog, obviously, and I use a screen reader to access digital information. So I have a little bit of residual vision remaining, but for all intensive purposes, I am blind. And that's how the world sees me, so that's how I identify. So thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me talk a little bit about what we can do so blind travelers have a more inclusive experience. Oh, yeah. Are we on which one's forward?
The largest button that you
Is forward. This one here?
just one right there.
That one with the tactile indicator on it, yeah.
On the slide.
And
Your picture.
my picture? Okay, perfect. You'll see me looking at the slides. I can see enough to be dangerous, but I can't read the slides. Old habits are hard to break. So first, I want to start by just telling the story about how I travel. And, I travel by myself quite a lot, just Dazzler and me. And the biggest barrier that we face is people's attitude. So I can navigate stairs just fine, although people, I've had a vacation rental host say, "Oh, you can't stay at my place because there's stairs." But I've climbed most of the glaciated peaks in the lower 48, or I'm sorry, in the Pacific Northwest. So I think a set of stairs is no problem for me. But I'm going to advance the slide here, so let me know if it doesn't change. Just because a man lacks his eyesight doesn't mean he lacks vision. And that's a Stevie Wonder quote that you see on the screen. And this spoke to me because I think I used to identify as low vision or vision impaired or whatever, but I still have vision. I still have my mind's eye. I have a very vivid imagination. And I use what little vision I have, or if any, I use my other senses to create a mental image. But I think the important takeaway here is just open your mind and think about blindness in a different way. Blindness is not what holds me back. It's people's perception of my abilities that holds me back. People lowering their expectations is what holds me back. So I want to talk today about some things that we can do, very practical things that we can do to make travel more inclusive for blind people. But the most important foundational piece is how you think about it. and how we teach people to think about blindness. So I broke the travel life cycle down into 3 components. So we have pre-trip, in-trip, and post-trip. So let's talk a little bit about each one. And so now you should see the pre-trip. Is the pre-trip slide loaded? It should say dream. So inspire me with stories. And we've heard other speakers talk about inclusive imagery. So having images of people like me in your marketing. And I know, again, coming from a blind person, that sounds counterintuitive, but I want you to change the way you think about blindness. It doesn't mean that we can't see. It just means that we have a different way of seeing. But inspire me with stories, importantly. Just, include people with disabilities in general, and for the sake of this topic, blind people, in the stories that we share. And then the next stage should be search and book, and that's something very near and dear to my heart, working for Expedia Group, and especially starting as a front-end developer, working on our website and our mobile app. Make sure those things are accessible. I think something like 90% of websites have a severity 1 issue, in other words, a blocking issue on their homepage, and those are WebAIM data. So if you go to webaim.org, you can see the research that's been done. An overwhelming majority of websites are hugely inaccessible to people who rely on assistive technologies. And also, again, providing adequate information. So let me know what I'm getting into. I like to see things like, is there public transit nearby, being that I don't drive? That's really helpful to me. Can I get from the airport to your property or from a hotel to your activity and independently? And I know there's things like Lyft and Uber and such, but I want to have options, just like anyone wants to have options. And so the next slide here should be, what are we to now? Pre-trip? Prepare, yeah. Okay. So this is where, like, after I've booked, I want for you to give me confidence. Like, hey, we know you're coming. We see that you're traveling with a guide dog, or we see that you've submitted a service request, some need that you have upon arrival. Just reinforce that. Build confidence. Make me feel confident about my decision. It's really important to build that trust, and you want loyalty in your customers. Repeat customers are much, much cheaper than new customers to onboard. So if you start here, pre-trip, building that loyalty, building that relationship. And then I'm going to keep moving here. Is this in-trip? Do you see travel, arrive, stay? Awesome. Something that's really been helpful for me, and when I fly, is having people understand. Airports are really difficult to navigate. I don't need a wheelchair. I just need a sighted guide, and it's often that I wait for 30 minutes, an hour sometimes for a sighted guide at the airport, and it's really frustrating, and it's not equitable. It's not an equitable solution, but. Fortunately, we have Ira, which is an app that blind people use that leverages the phone camera and allows a remote agent to see what's in front of me. And I'm able, that's provided free in a lot of airports now. So I'm able to navigate using my dog for mobility and safety, and then using the Ira agent for wayfinding. There's also lots of other wayfinding technology that's out there. We know things like Good Maps and indoor wayfinding is sort of an emerging technology that we're seeing in a lot of locations. So that's a really awesome thing that you can provide. If anyone's here who works for an airport, check out Ira. When I arrive at a hotel, it's really helpful if I can easily find the front desk. If you see a blind person coming in, you can use your words to greet them. That gives me an audible cue. Having tactile indicators on the floor when there's changes. So like going from tile to carpet, and we want to be really careful with carpet that can introduce barriers for wheelchair users. But just having a tactile change on the floor that I can feel with my feet that shows me maybe there's, I'm in a lobby and there's an elevator bank off to the side. So I see a lot of places will have a strip of tile just in the carpet so that I feel that with my feet, and I know that maybe there's something I should explore to the right or to the left. And again, just, using, I have enough vision to see people watching me and not saying anything, and it doesn't help. If it would be helpful if people would just say hello and welcome, and using audible cues to help me find my way around. That's, and of course, the simple things that we can do, like, braille signage, tactile indicators, high contrast edges. So a really inclusive design would be like light colored walls with dark colored trim and doors, so that low vision and reduced sight travelers are able to see the contrast and find their way around independently. That's hugely important. We want to be independent. And then I'll just keep moving here. Now, we should be post-trip here. This is ask me how my trip went, get feedback from me, and use that to improve. Now, do you see that on the slides? Yes. Okay, perfect. And I'm just going to keep moving. I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A, and I do not want rotten tomatoes if I go into your lunchtime. So, what do you see on the screen now? Perfect. All right, so number one, educate yourself and your staff. So if you are a travel professional, if you provide a travel product, activity, hotel, if you work for an airline or an airport, transfer service, whatever industry you're in, educate yourself and educate your staff about what are the rights and the responsibilities of people with disabilities. And this is important because I have rights, but I also have responsibilities. I am responsible to make sure my guide dog is well behaved and clean and healthy. That's not on the travel provider. That's on me. What is on the travel provider is my right to access your facility. Now, I get a lot of friction when I travel. I tell this story quite a lot. I was in Brussels, Belgium, and got off the train from Amsterdam at 5 p.m., walked across the street to the hotel. As soon as I walked in the door, the guy says, "No service dogs in my hotel." And I said, Belgium has access laws, and it's illegal for you to do that. And he says, "I don't care. I'm canceling your reservation." So I was on the street. My partner and I were on the street at 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon with nowhere to stay. So we went to a second property, walked across the lobby to the desk, asked if there was vacancy. Yes. Well, can we book a room? Yes. Got the room booked. The gentleman came from around the desk to hand us the key and show us the way. And he sees my dog, and he stops and says, "Oh, I didn't know you had a dog." Now, how he missed her, I don't know. As Helen Keller said, there's none more blind than those who refuse to see. So he canceled our reservation. And the third hotel proclaimed to be pet-friendly, and a lot of us with guide dogs sort our search results by pet-friendly because we want to avoid these exact scenarios. So we booked that property, the third one. By this time it's dark and raining, of course, and we're tired and exhausted from dragging luggage around Brussels. We get to the property, and we were able to stay. Fortunately, we had a bed for the night, but it was the most awkward encounter with people, talking behind their hands and pointing, and it was just extremely, extremely uncomfortable. So needless to say, the chocolate and beer tour the next day didn't go any better. And we were happy as hell to get out of Brussels and on to Luxembourg, where we had a wonderful, wonderful experience. It comes down to attitude and education. So please educate yourself on what are your rights and what are my rights, what are your responsibilities and what are my responsibilities. Change the way you think. I was thinking about that chocolate tour, the first chocolate shop we went to in Brussels, the guy was like, "Oh, no dogs. We're making food in here." I'm like, she's not in the kitchen. She's not flipping burgers, whatever. She's, how many people shed? You have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people come through here shedding hair and skin. You have one service dog. Why are you worried about my dog shedding in the lobby of your chocolate shop? It's just attitude. It's not, it's artificial barriers. These barriers don't exist. People create them. And let's see, what else do I want to point out here? I left this, Expedia has just released our lodging accessibility guide. There's a QR code on the screen. If you can't see the screen, let me know. I'll be sure to send you a link. But there is a QR code you can point your phone at and download that. So we have some helpful tips in there, not just how to be more inclusive, but why you should. It can be used as a tool to educate yourself and your staff. And again, we have the Expedia has the CEO Action Inclusive Travel Committee. So we talked about that yesterday a bit if you were here. This is a group of hundreds of CEOs who have signed on to the Inclusive Action Pledge. And Expedia pulled together the 30 some odd travel industry CEOs and formed this subgroup. And we are committed to moving the needle in this space with our leverage as the world's largest travel platform. So I'm going to stop here. There's other stuff that we could talk about. I want to turn it over to you all to ask me questions. What would you like to talk about today?
You can keep that. I have this microphone.
Okay, lovely. Do we have any questions? Come on.
We have a couple questions here.
Okay, sweet.
Toby, I'm going to start here in the back with Talia.
Hi, Toby. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was just curious if I guess as destinations, we have to advocate for these things, and I was wondering about your process internally at Expedia and how you were able to get this on the forefront, and maybe if there are some nuggets there that can be shared with all of us as we look to make things more accessible.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not easy. I started a grassroots movement at Expedia. I just lit fires in every corner of the company where I could. People love doing this work because it's altruistic and it's meaningful. It's not just creating widgets, it's actually changing lives. I think once the leadership started to see how people were passionate about it, I was really fortunate to be able to get a conversation with the CEO, and from there just started educating the C-suite about the business opportunity. I mean, this is, a $100 billion a year market. And through my research, I was able to demonstrate a $9 billion total addressable market in the US alone, just in lodging. $9 billion gross booking value for Expedia Group. And once I was able to demonstrate that, I got a little bit of this top-down mandate where it says, okay, we have to do this. And those two things, that grassroots movement, which let me say, that will burn out if you don't have the resources to keep it going. People are passionate about doing it, but when you're doing it off the side of your desk, it's not sustainable. So it's really important not to burn your people out. You have to resource the work, and that is, in my opinion, the hardest part. But I think really showing storytelling, being able to get in front of people with who control the purse strings and telling these stories, especially your personal experience, really motivates the company, along with, of course, the business case, to invest.
Thanks, Toby. I think we have another question here.
Did you, sorry, and I hope I'm in space for a minute. When you had those experiences there, did you contact the Belgian Tourist Authority or organization there? And have you had similar experiences with Uber? I assisted a blind gentleman who's one of our presenters at Esto in Los Angeles last year. And I was hanging out with him and his dog. And we really had a hard time with Uber drivers allowing us in there with a beautifully behaved Labrador. I mean, the dog was precious.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that's a huge barrier, no doubt. So the first part of the question, yes, I contacted an advocacy organization in Belgium, but that's a good idea to contact the tourism professionals, authorities. But I just immediately reached out to an advocacy group who did that for me. And the second part of the question, yes, Uber and Lyft drivers are often unaware of the access rights of people who use service animals, and I think that's a gap that we see closing. I think there's been progress made, and I appreciate the efforts that Uber and Lyft both are doing to hold their drivers accountable. And I think there's obviously some cultural and differences that we have to be cognizant of, and I don't want to be somewhere I'm not wanted. So I think, again, it goes back to the attitude. If we can convince people that it's important, we have money, we want to spend it, and we're good customers. So I think sort of where all those things intersect is where we need to continue to put the effort to change that.
Toby, I have one more question for you. There are a lot of destinations here in the room and a lot of travel suppliers. If you were to give one kind of nugget, one kernel of advice, what is one simple, low-cost, medium-cost, however you want to frame that, thing that we can do for travelers who are blind who are coming to our destinations, or can do for them before they come to our destinations?
Yeah, great question. There's advocacy organizations in your community who will work for free to teach you etiquette and best practices for what you can do depending on the product that you're providing or service that you're providing. I think just engage with those local advocacy organizations, ask for help, ask for guidance, ask for training, and you can get that for very low cost, if not free. And again, just change the way that you and your staff think about disability and blindness, especially in this case. Not especially, but for the sake of this conversation. I think this applies to anyone with a disability. Like, we don't want people staring at us. We're not freak shows. We are people too. And the disability is not what defines us. It is part of our experience. But the way that you think about it and the way that you act and behave is the biggest barrier that most of us face.
So,
thank you.
Anyway, Toby, thank you very much. I think one of the aspects that we're talking about is really, you can tell by this story, it's created empathy. We've all had negative experiences, but nothing like this. So that sort of empathy goes back to your offices, and that creates the change. And anyway, thank you very much, Toby. And then on the...
Thanks, Jake.